Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and today I'm going to be doing a Gizmek deck profile. So I'm really excited this week guys because this deck was actually suggested to me by one of my patrons, Sienna. And this deck is a really amazing deck that revolves around using machine monsters that have the same attack and defense, which is a really interesting concept for a deck. It also has some of the best artwork ever in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I really love the way the deck plays. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like getting in the description of a single video, getting a signed cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your patron along with test hands. And definitely give Sienna some love down in the comments down below for suggesting such an awesome deck. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're playing a single copy of Gizmek Okami, the Deluge Dragon. This card is a very neat effect that's actually a board wipe. It has the ability that you can pay 1500 life points to destroy all monsters on the field that were special summoned from the extra deck, which is a great effect just to give you an immediate board wipe. But you can only attack with one monster for the rest of the turn, which is not that big of a deal because board wiping and then attacking with a 2950 attack point monster is a really good play. It also has a really neat effect to special summon itself out to your side of the field that if two or more monsters that were special summoned from the extra deck are on the field, you can immediately special summon this card from your hand. And if this card in your possession is sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card, then you can banish one monster from your opponent's graveyard and then gain life points equal to its attack, which is a great effect just to give you a little bit of those life points back. We then play a single copy of Gizmek Kaku, which is very similar to like a relinquished monster because it has the ability that if a monster is in the extra monster zone, you can special summon this card from your hand and then target one face-up monster in the extra monster zone and equip that face-up monster to this card, minimum one, and then, or maximum one, excuse me. And when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can special summon one monster equipped to this card, and you'll only use each effect of this card once per turn. It's a great card to special summon out to your side of the field, and then basically give you a relinquished with 29 or 2750 attack point, which is really good. We then play two copies of Gizmek Uka. This card is really good as well because this card is a super amazing card that basically is a flare metal because it has the ability that each time your opponent normal or special summons a monster, they take 300 points of damage. And then you can only use each of the following effects of this card once per turn. If a monster is special summoned from the main deck, then you can special summon this card from your hand. And if this card is normal or special summon, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls, then special summon one monster from your hand or deck whose attack equals its own defense with a same attribute, which is very easy for this deck to do because you play every single attribute in the game from wind, water, fire, earth, light, and dark. In this deck you play them all. We then play three copies of Gizmek Orochi. Gizmek Orochi is really good as well because this card is the main card that you're going to be special summoning all the time in this deck because this card has the ability that if it's in your hand or graveyard, you banish the top 8 cards of your deck to special summon this card, and it also has the ability that you can banish 3 cards from your extra deck face down and then target one face-up monster on the field and destroy it, which is a great effect just to be able to pop a card, but you can only use either of this card's effects once per turn. We then play three copies of the Gizmek Makami, the Fanged Fortress. This card is the best normal summon in the entire deck. And you might be looking at this card and going, wait, that card requires tributes. Well, it actually doesn't with all the cards that we play in this deck. So this card actually has the ability that while 6 or more of your cards are banished, you can normal summon this card without tributing. And it also has the ability, if this card is normal or special summon, you can discard a monster to add one monster whose attack equals its own defense from your deck to your hand, except another copy of itself. And if this card in the monster zone is destroyed, you can shuffle back 6 of your banished cards back into the deck, which is really good. And basically this card plus Pot of Extravagance sets up for normal summoning this card for free, which is really good. We then play 3 copies of the Gizmek Hog. This card is really good for the deck as well because it has the ability that it can special summon itself to your side of the field if you control a machine monster whose attack equals its defense, which is a great effect. It also has the ability that then you can target one machine monster you control. It also has the ability that you can banish this card from the graveyard to target a machine monster that you control whose attack equals its defense to send a monster from your deck to the graveyard whose attack equals its defense with a lower level than the monster that you target with this effect. And if you do, the targeted monster gains attack and defense equal to the level of that monster sent to the graveyard times 100, which is pretty good just to give you a little bit of a boost. We then played 2 copies of the Gizmek Toad. This card is pretty good too. This card works out really well with Urgent Schedule, but it has the ability, if it's normal or special summon, you can take a machine monster whose attack equals its defense, then place it on top of your deck, which is a really good effect. But you can also banish it from the graveyard, and then target a machine monster in your graveyard whose attack equals its own defense, and special summon it in defense position, which is a pretty good effect as well, just to give you another monster reborn. We then played 2 copies of the Gizmek. This copy of the Gizmek, this card is really good because it has the ability to tribute a machine monster whose attack equals its own defense, to special summon from your deck 1 machine monster whose attack equals its own defense with a lower level than the tributed monster, and then you can banish this card from the graveyard to add 1 monster or 1 of your banished face down machine monsters whose attack equals its own defense back, which is a pretty good effect, and it's a really amazing card to play the 2 copies of the Phoenix, because this card is just a really good card. I did consider bumping it down to 1 to play 3 of the Toad, but I really just settled on 2 and 2. We then played 3 copies of the Gizmek Hare. This card is really good. The rabbit is just really good, and it's one of the only, I think it's the only monster in the entire game that actually has 50 attack and 50 defense. I don't think there's another monster in the entire game that actually has those stats. But this card is really neat because it has the ability that when this card is normal summon, you can special summon a machine monster from your hand that's attack equals its own defense in defense position, and then you can banish this card from your graveyard to target a machine monster you control whose attack equals its own defense. In this turn, you cannot declare attacks with monsters except for the monster that you targeted with this effect, but that monster gains attacks equal to all the monsters you currently control that are machine monsters whose attack equals their own defense. So basically it makes 1 monster a really big OTK piece, which is really awesome. We then play 3 copies of Eater of Millions. Eater of Millions comes in very handy in this deck because the Eater of Millions basically sets you up some really insane plays, because you're banishing so many cards in this deck that this card gains 100 attack for each face down card that's banished. So this card can get quite big and deals with a lot of different cards that your opponent might have on their side of the field. We then play a single copy of the Ancient Gear Reactor Dragon. You might be wondering, wait, why are we playing Ancient Gears in here? Well, this card actually works really well with Urgent Schedule, and its attack does equal its own defense at 3,000. So we do play this card as a 1 of in the deck for Urgent Schedule, and it does equal its own attack and defense. So that's it for the monsters that aren't kaijus. Let's get into the kaiju monsters. So for the kaijus that we're playing, because this deck is a very going second build, we're playing a single copy of the Star Destroying Kaiju, 1 copy of Dolgaran, 1 copy of Gandarla, 1 copy of Kamungus, and then 2 copies of Gameciel. So you're actually playing 6 kaijus in this deck. I did consider playing 1 of each of the kaijus in this deck, but I think that this number is totally fine because a lot of your machine monsters can out all of these cards, which is why I like to play these particular 6 cards. These are really good to play in this deck, and there's a tech card in the deck that can actually make any of them be able to gain attack or defense points, which is really amazing to kind of flip the attack and defense. So that's it for the kaiju monsters. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing a single copy of Gear Town. Gear Town is really good in this deck because it makes it so both players can normal summon Ancient Gear monsters, but the main effect of this card is that you can special summon 1 Ancient Gear monster from your hand, deck, or grave if this card is destroyed, which we play Ancient Gear Ballista in this deck, so you can do that very easily. We then play 2 cards that are actually a tech card that Sienna suggested that I'm actually going to put face down, and we're going to play Guess That Card. So I'm just going to set these 2 cards down, and I'm going to let you guys guess in the comments down below. So definitely comment down there. Tell me what you guys think it is, and we'll reveal it in 3, 2, 1. And definitely don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and definitely give some Sienna some love for this one, because this deck is a really fun deck and is also a really awesome tech card for this deck. So it's actually going to be a super old school card called Shield and Sword. So this is a card I bet you weren't expecting in this deck, but I'm actually playing 2 copies of it. Since all of our monsters had the same attack as defense, it doesn't affect any of our monsters, because by flipping their attack and defense, they're the same. So it doesn't affect our monsters. But the really funny thing is when you give your opponent the copy of, say, I don't know, Dolgaran, who has 1,200 defense and 3,000 attack, and they think they have a big kaiju on their side of the field, and then you flip the attack and defense with your copy of Shield and Sword. And since everything we play in the extra deck is actually going to be Link monsters, this card comes in ridiculously handy to be able to out really powerful cards that our opponent has that has high attack and low defense, and it helps us OTK the opponent. We then play 2 copies of Urgent Schedule. Urgent Schedule is really helpful because it lets us special summon out Earth Machine monsters from the deck. One that's level 4 or lower and one that's level 5 or higher to our side of the field is a really great thing. We play 3 copies of Interrupted Kaiju Slumber just to deal with boards because this is a very going second deck. And then we play 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance because Pot of Extravagance is going to let us draw those additional cards. And plus, it makes our copy of the Fanged Fortress live because we're going to banish 6 cards from the extract to be able to resolve this card to get us a draw 2 that then we can normal summon out that copy of the Fanged Fortress and get us a search as well, which this is a great play to be able to do. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing 2 copies of the Topologic Link 4, the Topologic Dragon. This card is really neat to combo alongside your copy of Gizmek Orochi because you can actually special summon Gizmek Orochi to a zone this card points to and destroy all the monsters on the field, which can be a really interesting interruption against your opponent. We play 2 copies of Zeroboros since we banished so much stuff in this deck, so we're playing double Zeroboros in this deck because this card comes in very handy at locking down zones and being able to banish every monster on the field and then coming back with 200 attack points for each banished card. This card can get humongous because in upwards of like 30 cards can get banished in this deck, and 30 times 2 is like 6,000 on top of the 3,000 that it already has. This card can get absolutely humongous. Play a single copy of the Blackluster Soldier, Soldier of Chaos. This card comes in really handy in the deck as well. I just played it as a one-of. If you don't want to play this card, you can drop it for another copy of the next card, which is Topologic Trisbania. Trisbania is really good because it can out spells and traps. I do play the one Blackluster Soldier in here because we play so many high-level monsters, and it comes in kind of handy sometimes, but if I do hit it with Pot of Extravagance, it's not that big of a deal. We then play 2 copies of Unicorn because Unicorn spins stuff, so this card comes in very handy. I play a single copy of Pentastag because Pentastag pointing to a monster gives it piercing damage, which is really helpful. Double Ancient Gear Ballistic because it can search Gear Town and pop a card and then pop the Gear Town, which is pretty good to be able to special summon out your Reactor Dragon, which can go into some really fun plays. We play 2 copies of IP Masquerena to shuffle or to go into your copy of Nightmare Unicorn during your opponent's turn to get you a bounce, which is really good. And then we play 2 copies of Link Rebo for the copy of the Gizmek Rabbit to link it away for this card. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you enjoyed. It's a really awesome deck to play around with. I really love the way that the deck plays. It has all sorts of crazy, awesome like plays to go into. It's primarily an OTK based deck, and I can't wait for you guys to see the test hands because they are absolutely insane. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell in there so you can become part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.